welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the 2011 Christmas special, The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, written by Stephen Moffat and is directed by Ferry Blackburn, which is his first story for the series. We'll also likely be talking about its prequel episode, which doesn't have any credited writer or director, but presumably it's by the same crew. So this is the 2011 Christmas special, and a lot of people, when this story came out, were very hesitant about this adventure. This is not only the second story that the Christmas special during the 11th Doctor and the Stephen Moffat era, but again, it's also a story which is a slight adaptation of sorts of another famous story. Here, this story has many parallels with the novel The Witch, the Lion and the Wardrobe, the Narnia books. Of course, I don't have to really explain Narnia, it was a big franchise back in the day. When this episode came out, Narnia was still a massive franchise in terms of its movie gross, so it is it's a big deal. Basically, the concept of the idea of the novel The Witch, the Lion and the Wardrobe is that four kids, they get transported through a wardrobe, and they enter themselves into a magical, snowy, alternate universe where they meet fairy tale creatures and they have to fight the Ice Queen, in a sense. This story essentially does what it did last Christmas, A Christmas Carol, where it takes that story, takes that beat, and basically runs with it. However, one thing I find really strange about this is that with the Christmas Carol, sure, it plays many parallels to Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, but I thought what was really clever about that is that the Doctor is in a universe where he's met Charles Dickens, so he gets the idea of the Christmas Carol-like storyline from the actual Christmas Carol. This story doesn't do that. It doesn't have the Doctor. There's one moment where the Doctor calls the TARDIS the Wardrobe, so I'm guessing that's the wardrobe in the title of the episode. However, the TARDIS doesn't actually play any role in the story in any way, shape or form. It's really strange. But anyway, when this story aired, it was absolutely panned. At best, people thought it was a guilty pleasure and thought it was at least enjoyable in terms of, it's a Christmas special. People enjoy just to have, just turn off your brain and have a fun laugh. But for people who mainly focus on the narratives of stuff, like myself, this story was an absolute drag. It was a painful experience back in 2011. However, of course, I've grown since then, and we've all grown in, and time can help sometimes. So, yeah, that's the. I mean, it's still not loved by people, but it is considered one of, if not the weakest Christmas specials until the 12th Doctor had some Christmas specials of his own. So, there's that to consider. So anyway. I will start off with talking about the prequel episode, because the prequel episode and the start of the actual story, the pre-credit sequence, actually add a sort of a mini episode. It does essentially the same type of plot device as James Bond. For those of you who don't know James Bond, usually in a James Bond film you would have a small little action piece which would have very little, if not have nothing to do with the main overarching story. Basically, it's just a great way to kick the story in with some action. And this story does that. The main action beat at the start has nothing really to do with the adventure of the story. However, let's talk about where we left the Doctor last time. The last time we've seen the Doctor, especially in TV, is in the story The Wedding of River Song. And by the end of that, the Doctor promises to Dorian that he has gotten too big, he's gotten too loud. So it's time for him to climb back into the shadows. It's time for him to be more sneaky, be a bit more calculated with his risks and his, how he presents himself. So that kind of teased that we were going to get a much different, a much more quieter Doctor, a Doctor who would try and stay in the shadows. What's the first thing he does in the main episode? Blows up an entire fleet on top of Earth. You don't get any louder than that. But let's talk about the prequel episode. Essentially, you see the Doctor on this massive spacecraft, and he's holding a button, and when it's released, it will destroy the ship. And the Doctor needs to, disintegrate the ship before he can attack and destroy Earth. He's on the phone to what he presumes is Amy connecting to the TARDIS, and he's like, right, I'm in a bit of a trouble here. If I leave go of this button, the ship will entirely explode, and I need help getting to the ship. So I'm going to send you the coordinates, and you can fly the TARDIS towards me. There's only 3 problems in this plan. A, I don't have the coordinates. B, you don't know how to fly the TARDIS. And C, you're not actually there. You left a long time ago, which is a reference to the fact that the Doctor left Amy and Rory in the God Complex, and from his point of view, they believe that he is dead. And that's basically it. As the prequel ends with the Doctor releasing his finger from the button, essentially destroying the ship, which then ties into the start of the main episode. And it's one of those things where, again, it's technically fluff. You don't learn anything, you don't need anything of it. But I actually really like this prequel episode. And to get, like I said, with the whole pre-credit sequence as well, that short little mini-sode of sorts, a short little story prior to the main event of the narrative. I actually really enjoy it. And easily the best thing about this story is that pre-credit sequence, because the action-packedness of it is so movie and blockbuster. I'm telling you, it kicks ass. And what this does, the prequel does, is essentially gives a little bit of an emotional hook, as the Doctor kind of is like, right, usually I ask for my companions for help, but at this point in time, Amy and Rory is not there, and he kind of has this small little moment where he kind of looks at the camera and is just like, I was trying to say goodbye before we're all blown to smithereens, but of course you're not there, you can't even hear me, so he's kind of like trying to process himself, and then cuts into the main episode. So I actually really recommend the pre-credit sequence, prequel episode, sorry. That is, of course, if you actually watch the main episode. You can't really watch it on its own. But let's talk about that pre-credit sequence, because that is awesome. I wouldn't even be surprised if Stephen Moffat wrote this entire story just so he can have that pre-credit sequence. It is gorgeous. Ferry Blackburn's directing. It's so quick, so action-packed. There's explosions everywhere. Just to see Matt Smith has probably one of the coolest runs of the Doctor. I mean, physically, his run. that's a really weird statement, but it's true. And you've got like explosions everywhere, and you really feel the 11th Doctor era, as you've got I Am the Doctor. This version of the theme is called Geronimo, if you want to look it up on YouTube or something, or get the soundtrack. Get the soundtrack. One of the great things about this episode is Murray Gold's music. It is gorgeous. But anyway, you got the I Am the Doctor, but it's the epic Geronimo version. So Matt Smith running, you got that dun 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 dun. As the ship is exploding around him, he kind of finds himself in a room which also explodes in half of its thing, and so you see the Doctor like hanging off to as he's getting sucked out into the higher atmosphere of Earth, and there's a spacesuit, not exactly a spacesuit, it's I can't remember what the word is, a impact suit. So when if somebody is wearing a suit and they crash land into something like Earth, for example, it will fix them. And so the Doctor tries to grab it, however that falls out of the spaceship, and because the ship is exploded, the Doctor himself falls out of the spaceship as he's chasing himself as he's falling to Earth. Now, one of the big criticisms, not big criticism with the story, but with this scene, is that the way the scene is shot, the Doctor looks more like he's in outer space rather than Earth's atmosphere. But it's actually where science actually takes the Doctor's side of things, as Earth's atmosphere is a lot more into the deeper of space than we usually think of when we think of Earth. So in that sense, Doctor Who, in terms of gravity, actually is scientifically accurate. In terms of the ability for the Doctor to breathe, it has been established that the Doctor has a stronger lung system than humanity. I don't know if that would help him with anything, but yeah. And then that is the pre-credit sequence. That is easily the coolest thing about this episode. And you've probably noticed that I'm spending most of the video talking about the pre-credit scene and its prequel. Because when the actual episode kicks in, oh my god, is it dull. Essentially, the Doctor crash lands and he gets introduced to Madge, this mother of two, and her husband, and she thinks that the Doctor's some sort of angel or something, and she kind of befriends the Doctor. And one of the big hindrances of the story is Madge and the actress that plays her, Claire Skinner. Now, Claire Skinner has done a lot of comedies. She usually plays the mother or the wife character in a setup of comedy. So this is something that should be a role especially suited for her. I haven't seen much of her performance outside of Doctor Who, but this is a role that she has found herself kind of typecast in a sense. If you're going by this episode, you can't see why. Her performance is all over the place, and I don't want to sound too hard because it does feel like she's trying, but it's just not a good performance. She doesn't seem she's interested in the role. I never once bought her as her character Madge, and Madge is, it doesn't help as well that Madge is just not a terribly interesting character. Though, you know, there's a storyline around her that's really interesting. It's just that the character's all over the place. The emotions of the character, one moment she's talking about like, oh, I gotta stop shouting at the kids, but we never see her shout a lot. She only like shouts at them like once before like immediately regretting it and saying it's, you know, constant, and the audience doesn't really feel it essentially. But anyway, essentially she meets the Doctor. She takes him to try and find the TARDIS in a humorous moment where they find the police telephone box. The Doctor tries to wave goodbye. He says, oh yeah, if you need me, just make a wish and I'll appear. Like, there's a jokey thing, but then it turns out that the police telephone box that he finds himself in is an actual police telephone box. So she goes around chasing out with him to find the police telephone box until they find the TARDIS, of course. But then we cut into, this scene takes place in 1936, I want to say. So we cut then to a few years later where World War II has just kicked in, and essentially her husband, I can't remember his name, but he's played by Alexander Armstrong. For those of you who don't know, he is a big British actor, mainly known for playing as Mr. Smith, the voice of Mr. Smith in the Sarah Jane Adventures. So it's really cool to have him here. He has no impact in the story. He's completely wasted, and essentially at the start of the story, it's presumed that he is killed as he's in his airplane and his one of the engines of the plane has broken down, wife's in a Spitfire, so he's going to have to make a crash landing. And just before Christmas, essentially, Madge gets news of it, and she's struggling to tell her children about the death of their father. Whilst there's the Blitz, whilst there's the war going on, the family move to their uncle's, I think it's his uncle, and they're looking for the caretaker. However, it turns out the caretaker's been replaced by the Doctor. This is an aspect of the story which is very similar to The Witch, the Lion and Her Wardrobe, in which the four kids round about World War, I think it's World War II, World War I can't remember, they move out of the country to meet a family member who lives in this big mansion, and they discover this person, this caretaker of the castle, of the building, whatever it is, the manor, is this really quirky, strange character who has weird things in his house. For example, a police telephone box or a wardrobe that teleports you to another dimension. So yeah, the main issue here is the characters, our main protagonists, with the exception of course, Matt Smith as the Doctor. There are so many scenes in this story where Matt Smith is giving it his all in terms of performance. There's so much energy in him. There's so much. I love that scene where he's going around the house and he's trying to tell the family, it's like, I've made some improvements. Hot water, cold water, lemonade, the houses, it's like, this room is boring, I made some adjustments, and there's a really weird stop motion scene with the chairs moving. It's really bizarre. The Doctor then shows them the kids to the room, and this is where Madge has to go. The kids tells them to go downstairs, and that moment where the Doctor can see that Madge is really stressed, and the Doctor, he kind of quiets down. He's a bit more thoughtful. He can see that Madge is stressing. One thing as well, Madge doesn't realise that the Doctor is that man that she met a few years ago until right at the very end of the episode, which was kind of distracting, because Matt Smith does not have a voice you will forget. He has such a quirky voice that it's very, I think if this was any other Doctor, well, the fourth Doctor, actually, come to think about it, most of the Doctor's actors have very distinct voices. But yeah, with Matt Smith, as well, you wouldn't forget that voice. It's really bizarre. And it's the way he moves in his actions and stuff. But Madge is actually not really the main character, as the story then switches essentially from the perspective of the children. We have, what's his name? What's the boy's name? I want to say Carol. Oh, what's his name? I can't remember what the boy's name is. But essentially, the Doctor on Christmas Day has given him this massive big present, which is TARDIS Blue, and this is a very strange aspect of the story in terms of adapting the original novel, because there seems to be such an easy way to make the wardrobe, in a sense. The TARDIS, the Doctor even calls it the TARDIS, his wardrobe. But the portal to the other universe is actually a present the Doctor makes, which seems like a very strange and bizarre and a very immature thing for the Doctor to do. Also, I'd like to add, the Doctor is still at this point supposed to be this quiet thing that was set up in The Wedding of River Song. So that didn't really work. And essentially what happens in the story is the boy, because it's Christmas and he's excited, he goes downstairs to look at this present, he opens the box and gets transported into this world full of Christmas trees and snow. And essentially this creature, he starts noticing these footsteps, and so the boy starts following, whilst the Doctor has a little discussion with the daughter, Lily, and when they realised that Cyril is the boy's name. The doctor and Lily go and find I've forgotten his name again, the boy, and that's essentially the majority of the plot. It's basically the doctor and Lily trying to chase up to the boy, and all the drama, all the tension just drops you, and it becomes an absolute bore fest as essentially the story keeps cut in between these two for the most part. And this is actually a great, back to the ranch storytelling, where you have two plot lines and you let them build up. But that's the problem with this. It doesn't build up. For the most of the part, when it cuts to the boy, nothing really interesting or dramatic happens, with the exception of him meeting this wooden figure of a king, which we later learn is alive. But that happens near the end of the story, and it's mainly just him just looking around the forest, looking just kind of the same facial expression. Not to bash the kid actor or anything, but his performance really makes a dent in the story, as we don't really get that emotional hook with the character. But let's talk about one actress who actually does a really good job in the story. Holly Errol, who plays Lily, she does a really great job here, and she works well as being the sort of semi-companion to the doctor. There's a great line I like where she asks the doctor, is this fairyland? To which the doctor's just like, no, grow up. Fairyland looks completely different. I like that little line. And they do their best. However, again, there's nothing really there. The characters don't clash well enough that their scenes make the episode. It's just two good actors, with only one of them really having a great character to work off upon. But Holly Earl makes a big impression in the story, and a lot of people seem to think that she was easily one of the better things about this episode, because she has actually reprised the role in a Big Finish audio drama. That is true. That is 100% true. She appears in the Churchill Years, a audio drama spin-off featuring the Doctor's friend and real-life historical figure Winston Churchill, where it turns out that Lily is actually Churchill's nurse when he got old and gets bedridden and is ill. So yeah, that's kind of a big impact in the narrative. The Doctor knew that he was raising his friend's future nurse to the world of aliens and monsters and stuff. Was this played into part? I have no idea. I haven't actually heard the story she's appeared in the Churchill Years. I haven't actually heard any apart from one of the Churchill Years stories, which is The Oncoming Storm. Great story, by the way. But again, back to this episode. When they go into this fairyland, Narnia-inspired snowy wasteland, it's just dull. It is just dull. There's just nothing really of interest happening, despite the fact that the majority of the episodes is set here. There's very little I can talk about until the mother gets involved, and she meets three workers of the Androzani mining company, which, by the way, a great reference to the Caves of Androzani, the final story to feature the Fifth Doctor. Nice little nod back to that story. And we have Bid Bailey, we have what's his name from Benidorm, and we have that woman who once played the Doctor in the Big Finish audio drama Unbound Exile, which I've heard is really bad. But they basically act as comic relief. A lot of people seem to really like their characters in here, saying that they were one of the highlights of the story, that these three, which are played by famous comedians, especially Bill Bailey. They make up the lighter aspects. I personally could not stand them. And basically they meet up with Marge, and Marge, she pretends to be crying, and then she gets her gun out, and you really struggle to get a read in on the character. It's, I don't know, it's really hard to describe. The main problem with this episode is that it's so boring, and it's hard to describe what makes it so bad without just sounding like you're beating on the episode, because the episode does very little and gives you very little to work with, that just talking about it makes it sound like you're bashing it, because it seems like you're nitpicking, it seems like you're scrapping. But honest to God, this is literally like the entire episode. So going into the finale of the episode, essentially we learn that the forest is alive. The trees in this forest are alive, and they've basically sensed the acid rain from the Androzani company, which kind of makes them the main villains of the story. Even though the story really doesn't have a main villain, and there's no consequences for anyone's actions in this story, which means that, especially on a second viewing, it makes for dull television. But there's these two figures, they're a king and a queen, like wood creatures that can move around, and they have humanoid shapes. Not very out of character for the franchise of Doctor Who. The Doctor even mentions at one point that he met the Forest of Cheen and she fancied him, a reference to the ninth Doctor story, The End of the World. That's a great little nod as well. And essentially I can't believe I'm actually going to say this. They have this ship which transports the souls of the trees. However, they need a pilot, and they need a pilot that is quote unquote strong. The Doctor and Cyril, that's the one, Cyril, are weak. However, Lily and Madge, which when she puts on that crown and she gets the soul of the forest inside of her, her performance just really is just so off. That basically, according to the tree system, females are the biological strong ones, which I don't really have an issue with. It's just really strange, because they set this up as if this is going to be a big and empowering moment, but it's not. It's just a plot line. It's just a plot, like what, in terms of the plot, in terms of the narrative, in terms of the moral of the story, stops the Doctor or Cyril taking it on. Sure, Claire needs to, Claire technically is like the main character and stuff, and the Doctor uses this moment to try and push her memories to try and get them back home, which we will get to, but we could still add that in another way. It just seems really odd, and it seems like a really poor design in terms of the alien ship that they designed. A really cool alien design ship, by the way. It reminds me of what's that called? The giant TechnoQuest, that big ball outside TechnoQuest. Reminds me of that. But yeah, let's talk about that ending, which is just, oh God. If you like, it depends on you. Some people like this episode, all power to you, but I don't think you can defend that ending. What am I on about? Well, it turns out that these aliens can also, these wood aliens can also transport their ship into the time vortex, sending them across time and space. And the Doctor basically pushes Marge to remember every moment of Earth, tries to bring her back to her timeline. However, because of her memory, she remembers her husband and him dying, and she's like, no, please don't make me remember that, please, please don't let me see him die. And the kid's like, wait, what? Dad's dead? And we see a flashback then of Alexander Armstrong's character in the ship, and he sees something different, like a light, as he hears his magic voice, seemingly. And the story then has the Doctor and everybody arrive back just outside the mansion, and the kids, it seems to go really dark. There seems to be this really gripping scene where the kids kind of step away from their mother, and it's like, Mum, what's happened to Dad? Where is Dad? You said he'd be home for Christmas. Where is he? So Madge kind of calms down. Doctor, stay close, but can I have a alone with my children? As we get this really potentially a powerful scene in which, a great ending in which, she kind of has to explain the death of her father, and we kind of learn that, that life is sometimes tough. Life doesn't stop being miserable because Christmas, and it's World War II. It's a great memory idea to remind the audience, that don't take stuff for granted. Spend every moment with where I'm going with this if you've seen the episode. The Doctor goes outside and he sees the plane, he sees the father, he's alive and well, all the consequences of the story. Nope, forget about it. It turns out that the actual moral of the story is, you didn't love your family hard enough if they were killed near Christmas. What the fuck? Oh my god, when that revelation where they turns out they saved the father is easily one of the worst endings, which completely ruins. Sorry, my cat. I'll quickly rush up. I don't know if you can hear my cat. It completely ruins the episode. There's another scene like at the end of it. Essentially, the Doctor's about to say goodbye to Madge as everyone's happy thing, and Madge basically learns about Amy and Rory and how they think he's dead, and there is a fun little moment between Matt Smith and Claire Skinner where she basically acts like his mum and is like, that's sad, it's horrible, not for you, for your friends, they think you're dead, now go and meet them right now and tell them you're alive. And the Doctor's just like, yes, Mum. To which the ending, which a lot of people really liked, and was really one of the really big tear-jerking moment, is when the Doctor finds himself outside Amy's house. They basically explained that River Song told them everything, and they've left a train set for the Doctor out every Christmas in the hopes that he will return. So again, the moral of the story is keep hoping, and then everything will just sort itself out. But no, seriously, that ending scene, well directed, well acted. Karen Gillan's cameo and Arthur Darwell's cameo in his story, with Matt Smith who breaks into tears. The performance is there, and how the Doctor and Amy refuse to be the first one to hug. Absolutely brilliant there. But that's not the episode. That's not what the story is about. It's about the Madge character and her kids, and the story about the father, even though that has nothing to do with the majority of the plot. It's mainly about the Doctor and Lily trying to find Cyril. And yeah, that's the Doctor, Widow and the Wardrobe. It's not very good. I don't know if you got this impression. It's not very good. It is poorly written, poorly acted for the most part. I found the scenery pretty boring. I found some of the supporting casts of the Androzani workers, I personally found them really frustrating and really annoying, and the story is all over the place, and it's so clear that this story seems to be pushed out just because it's a Christmas special. If this story was airing any other day, it would have taken those darker themes. It would have taken a much more focused narrative. However, it feels like clearly Stephen Moffat, like his previous story, refuses to let the Christmas stories be dark. Whether this is a mandate from BBC, as Russell T Davies kind of had similar issues, although not to the extent. He did let characters die on Christmas. He did let darker themes have on Christmas. However, the story mainly focuses on the happy, gigglier moments. It feels like Stephen Moffat really just doesn't understand the Christmas special, and it is easily up there as one of the worst stories of the. It might actually be my least favourite 11th Doctor story. I'm trying to think. What other story do I not like? Yeah, I think it is actually my least favourite Matt Smith story. So, yeah, that is pretty bad. That is pretty bad. It's just, it's just not interesting. And one of the worst things about the story is that it's boring. Mostly, despite, like I said, it's hard to talk about the story because it feels like I'm nitpicking. I'm grasping for issues. But the thing is that all the stuff, the rest of the stuff that I haven't talked about, it's the same old dull characters walking around, giving off exposition. It's that. And that's it. It's pretty dull. So, the Doctor, Widow, and the Wardrobe, only watch it for that pre-credit sequence. That's literally the only reason to watch this. And that ending as well, when the Doctor meets up with Amy and Rory. You can find them on YouTube. You don't want to watch this story, and many people agree with me. Though, if you do like the story, please put in the comments below. And I'd love to hear opinions. I don't want to take the mickey, and more power to you. I really, really tried to enjoy the story. I wanted to enjoy the story. If you found enjoyment, I'm honest to God, I'm envious of you. So please let me know if you like the story in the comments below. So anyway, that's Doctor, Widow, and the Wardrobe. So join me next time when the Doctor tries to reconnect Amy and Rory. However, they seem to be having some issues as an alien force, a familiar alien force, kidnaps them to send them on a secret mission on one of the deadliest planets in the universe. One of the greatest dangerous places that even the Doctor thought was a myth. So join me next time for the short series Pond Life, the prequel episode 2, and the main story, Asylum of the Daleks. And I'll see you next time from the Doctor Who Marathon as we start Series 7. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!